Good afternoon. Welcome to our program today. Congressman Morris Udall is visiting Pittsburgh and this program in his bid for the Democratic presidential nomination. It is said about Congressman Udall, more so than any of the other candidates, that he has a sense of humor. I'm not too sure we're going to see evidence of the sense of humor today because of some news that came in from Washington just a few moments before we start today's program, and it has to do with the possibility of his not receiving federal matching funds that has been promised to most of the candidates. This affects not only Congressman Udall, of course, but all candidates. How seriously would it affect your campaign?
Oh, very seriously. We set up this new system 2 years ago, and we were going to have matching funds. You give me $10,
yeah.
I match that with $10. That's the way we were going to get a lot of people involved instead of a few fat cats. Now, unless this law is renewed, which the Supreme Court held unconstitutional, I find myself here in Pennsylvania, I'm entitled to $150,000 today. We've raised that in little donations. We're entitled to have it paid to us. I've got television in the can ready to run, radio ads ready to run, and we just simply don't have the money. So it doesn't stop me from shaking hands on the street here in Pittsburgh the way we've been doing today, and it doesn't stop me from appearing on a program like this. But it really cripples me, and it'll cripple some of the other candidates in Pennsylvania until and unless the Congress acts to renew this law.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're all in the same boat, though.
Well, the problem is, you see, you can still raise money, and I suspect Senator Jackson's better off than most of us. He's had more access to large contributions. You can spend all you can raise. You simply don't get the 2-for-1, the matching formula. And we're raising money as fast as we can today. I've been on the phone, and we're trying to ask everyone to rally around us. But Senator Jackson had a better balance sheet to start with, and so I think he's advantaged here in Pennsylvania if the matching money's not made available.
I would say he has a better balance sheet. What brings this about? I mean, he represents issues that some of the various...
No, he started off with $2.5–3 million for the campaign, for the primaries ever got underway. And he had raised a good deal of this back under the old law before the $1,000 contribution limit was put on. So he had quite an advantage when he started, and I think his bank account was a little bit better at the starting line than ours. I threw everything we had into New York and Wisconsin and did very well in those two states, but we had assumed we'd have the matching money to begin our campaign here in Pennsylvania.
You've had a long day in Pittsburgh so far. You started at 7 o'clock this morning at Jones and Laughlin. You've done news interviews. You have been on walking tours of the city. You've been shaking hands. It's been a long time. I would think, too, that you get tired of facing reporters' questions, especially from reporters who try to find contradictions in some of the things that you have said. I have to plead guilty there, too.
Well, that's your job. That's your job.
But just in reading information about some of your statements, you have been quoted as saying that you're suspicious of driven men who feel they must be president, and I believe you identified Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon as men who were driven.
No, I didn't. I think if the shoe fits, maybe some people would want to put it on Carter, but I've used Nixon as the prime example. I think we ought to be wary of people, not who want the president to do something, but who feel some inner drive that they have to be president, that there's some inner reason that they've got to have it. Watch out for those kinds of people. I think you need people who want to be president to do some things for the country, but don't have any personal felt need for it. That's what to watch out for.
Okay. And you said about Jimmy Carter, too, that he has no discernible sense of humor, which you find unforgivable.
Well, it helps. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself a little bit in this country. I've always been a little bit leery of people who can't laugh at themselves. Not at the country's problems. The country's problems are serious. But you ought to be able to laugh at the political system and laugh a little bit at yourselves, too.
Okay, to complete this contradiction that I was pointing to, with all that you've said then about Carter, you've also said that you would not refuse a request to be a vice president on a ticket with Jimmy Carter.
Well, I'm not running for vice president. I'm running for president. And you get off in these hypothetical questions. I've decided to say that if they can dig up and resuscitate Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, I will run with either one of them, but I'm not going to get into any name game. And I expect to be picking the vice president and not to be picked. So things are going very well. Our campaign is really moving.
Congressman, you say that you're suspicious of men who have this inner drive to be president, that was so important. What is it that motivates you?
Well, I got in this in kind of a strange way. If you're a U.S. Senator and under 65 and not under indictment, the presumption is you're running for the presidency. Everybody does. They all run. Nearly all of them run. If you're in the House, you can be one of the good House members, like Billy Moorhead or someone from Pennsylvania. You'd be there forever. Nobody ever thinks the House members don't run, but we draw the same pay and have the same responsibilities as senators. 45 congressmen who represented about 20 million people urged me to run, signed a petition 2 years ago asking me to make the race. And I got into it on the basis that I see the country in trouble. I think we're going to have to make basic changes in our economic system and make it work and have jobs for people. We've got to reconcile these whole problems of energy and the environment. I think my record and background is one that might lead people to have some confidence in me to do this. And I want it. I want to be president. I can hardly wait to get to the White House and get health care and get jobs legislation and do something sensible about foreign policy. But life's been good to me, and it's going to go on if I don't get elected. I don't feel that my life is a failure if I don't get this nomination, but I want it because I want to do some things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look for contradictions, I suppose you find any number of them. But the fact that you are a liberal, you have won election 7 times in your state of Arizona, which is conservative, and with increasing majorities.
Well, I argue that this is a reason to take a look at me. The Democrats need someone who can appeal to independents and businessmen and farmers and a whole range of groups. I had to in Arizona. Goldwater took over the state and wiped us out. I'm the sole survivor, like General Custer in the massacre. And I had to learn to appeal and to talk sense to all kinds of people. And I think this might help me at the head of the ticket for the Democratic Party. Because we're a big party, we're a political conglomerate, we don't win unless we appeal to the middle road, to the ordinary average American. I think I can do that. I think my experience in Arizona proves that I can do it. And the fact that 45 congressmen would ask me to run proves I can do it.
But how does a liberal communicate with a conservative to the point that the conservative will vote for him? What is it you tell them?
Well, there's a contradiction here. You'll hear everyone says conservative year. Everyone slow down, against governments, great to not be in Washington and all of these things. And yet, to me, there's a real mood for change out there. The guy, you'll stop the fellow going home and say, are you conservative? Yes. Do you hate Washington? Yeah. Is government too big? Sure. And then you say, well, let's talk about some problems. Do you think there ought to be a job for all these kids that want to work, people that want to work? And he'll say, yes, government ought to give them a job, guarantee a job. You say, do you think we ought to have a universal health care system, going to cost a little more money? He'll say, yes, absolutely. Let's get on with it. I don't like my family wiped out. You say, should we break up oil companies so there's competition and get them off our backs and have an energy policy that we may? Yes, sir. So on the surface, they'll tell you it's very conservative. Down underneath, people want to do some things that sound pretty liberal or pretty progressive to me, and that's my platform, is sensible change, the way Franklin Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt led this country into.
Mm-hmm. Well, perhaps we'll continue this when we get back, but there were a couple of things I want to ask you actually about the liberal and the conservative. Is, at some point or way up there, is there really much difference? I mean, you're all for improving the economy, you're all for some kind of health care. There are so many similarities, and I'd like to know just what are the fine points.
All right, we'll talk about it. There are basic differences.
Okay,
we'll talk
fine.
About it.
We will return with Congressman Morris Udall, who seeks the Democratic presidential nomination, in just a few moments. Congressman Morris Udall is our guest in this first half of our program today. We are, of course, competing with the opening day of the baseball season here in Pittsburgh, and this leads to a bit of humor, I understand, or at least there is some joke somewhere in there about Democratic congressmen who make poor baseball players. Why?
Well, we have the baseball game every year between the Republicans and Democrats, and we used to play in front of the Washington Senators game. For 3 years, I was manager and pitcher for the team, and we lost every year, and it got worse and worse, and we could never beat the Republicans. And I used to trot out for the press my pitches, and back in '68, when Romney had all this trouble, I had the Romney fadeaway. There was a pitch that started out in a high trajectory, appeared to change position several times, and then dove into the ground. We had the credibility sinker, which was a pitch that had so little on it you just couldn't believe it. And every year, that's what he's joking about, we'd have this fun. But old Vinegar Ben Mizell was the pitcher for the Republicans for a couple of years. He was a former major league pitcher, and he'd strike everybody out. And my greatest claim to fame was that I hit a foul ball off him that hit a CBS cameraman who was covering down the first baseline. We always had a lot of fun, but the Democrats were never able to win the game.
Your background is in basketball. You were
I
pro basketball.
Played 1 year professional basketball with Denver. In college, we had a nationally ranked team, used to make a tour back through here. I played Duquesne, middle 1940s, 46, 47, when I was co-captain of the Arizona team.
They said you always played the long shot in basketball and that you're still doing it in politics.
Well, that's right. One of my brochures said Udall's a team player and he will get the team working together, and we ran across an old basketball playing friend of mine said, team player, heck, every time he got the ball he would shoot. So we have a lot of fun with my athletic background.
To get back to politics, we mentioned what is the difference actually between the liberal and the conservative when it comes to some of the big important issues facing this country. Can we just mention a few? Well,
yeah, without a 10-minute speech, I think the liberal conservative business comes down to attitudes, programs, people. I think Franklin Roosevelt, I think Theodore Roosevelt, John Kennedy, there were liberals because the liberal is for change, for sensible change. In every generation, you've got to do something about your economic system. You've got to change and adapt or the system doesn't work. I think also you can separate liberals from conservatives at any given moment on issues. In the 1960s, it was Medicare. Liberals were for it, conservatives against it. It was aid to education. It was the war in Vietnam for a long time. Now it bounces around health care legislation. Or is the government going to run it or the private insurance companies going to run it? It bounces off full employment. The conservative says cut taxes, give business an allowance, blow up the balloon, and we'll get jobs. Democrats say that may not work, let's do some of it, or liberals say, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to have to give people jobs directly rather than let them sit around and starve on welfare and food stamps. Franklin Roosevelt had a great, I've used this analogy. He said, he compared society to a tree. The tree gets old and rot starts in on some of the roots and the trunk and the branches die, and he says, the reactionary says, don't touch that old tree. The radical says, cut it down, it's no good. And the liberal, the prudent progressive says, there's a lot of good in that old tree, let's clean out the rot and give it some fertilizer and cut off the dead branches so the new shoots can come out and grow some things that we need. Analogy, maybe oversimplified, but that to me is kind of the distinction, change or against change. And you need both in society. You need conservatives, but you need liberals, and they're always fighting each other, and out of it, we seem to do all right in the long haul.
Mm-hmm. During a campaign, there is, of course, people like to take certain words that any candidate will say and twist them into a specific meaning. You mentioned before, for example, when I asked you about running for vice president with Jimmy Carter on a Jimmy Carter ticket, you indicated that you didn't actually say this, but that it was construed this way. Would you, I mean, being perfectly honest about it, Congressman, would you say that perhaps the same thing happened to Jimmy Carter on his ethnic purity remark?
Well, in a campaign, and one of the reasons for having a good long campaign is that you put us under stress. You see me when I'm tired, and you see me for the 400th time in a day answer a question. It happens to all of us. And all of this stress kind of tests you and shows what you really think and who you are, rather than looking at your canned speech. I got a stock speech that I know about every word of, and my television commercials are carefully prepared. But the real man, the real person comes out when you're off guard and when your thoughts come out. So sure, the ethnic purity thing by itself, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. But it was not just that. It was the attitude that led him to say that if we tell the blacks, the Polish, the Irish, the Jews, the whole people in our society, we say to them, work hard, be mobile, move out, you can have a better life, a better community. When a black family or a young Polish family or Italian family wants to move to the suburbs and there's nobody there but white Protestants, Carter used the term of black intrusion, that you're an intruder, he talked about outsiders, he talked about the homogeneity of the communities. He used terms that kind of alarmed me, in addition to the ethnic purity thing, seeming to say that the only good communities, the only stable communities that are free of crime are those that are all homogeneous and pure. Well, some of the best communities that I've ever lived in were those that were mixed up with different economic classes, different kinds of people. That's what America's all about. So it was not the words he used, it was a set of attitudes that troubled me.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the same time, it seemed to me that this ethnic purity of certain neighborhoods can be enjoyed. What I have in mind, for example, of course, having lived in New York and here, I know that we used to call it Germantown. Sure. in New York, and it was a joy. If you wanted to go for certain German food, you'd go in that area. Here we have many Italian neighborhoods, and it's nice because you can go in and get your mozzarella and ricotta and all the nice Italian foods. Bacala when it comes
sure.
to Christmas time and so forth. But you know, what is wrong with that?
Nothing.
It's nice to have
nothing.
a place where there are differences like that.
No, it's good. These are real values. We're a stronger country because we have ethnic neighborhoods, and there's nothing wrong with people who want to live in neighborhoods like that doing it. You belong to the church, your grandfather was there, you know the area. Those are good values. But it seemed to be saying, he seemed to be saying, let's draw down some walls and shut out people who want to move into neighborhoods. And I think the blacks, the thing with the blacks, and he was getting a lot of the black votes, he takes the position of no involuntary busing, only voluntary busing. And he seems to be saying, look, let's have integrated schools, but let's have integrated neighborhoods. And then he seems to be turning around and saying no integrated neighborhoods. We're going to keep them ethnically pure. And so if you're a black person and you'd like to get ahead and get out of a rotten neighborhood where there's a lot of crime and want to find a better community to live in, he seems to be saying that that's intrusion, that you're being injected into somebody else's neighborhood, when open housing, open opportunity has been our policy.
Is it politically advantageous to be critical, to harp on an opponent of yours?
Oh, I think so. In the long haul, people want positive, constructive. They want to know about you and what you do and what's good about you, not what's bad about your opponent. I didn't bring this up. You did. I must be frank to say, it comes up in every interview.
It does, yes.
But if I were going out, making speeches, taking the stump all day long about this, I think I should be criticized. I think it may die out in a while, but I'm not going to run away from it. I think it showed some things on Carter's part that we all ought to know about. It showed some attitudes. And I always believed, you know, in Boston, he was getting the vote in Roxbury, the black vote, and a mile away, with this busing controversy on, he was getting the white vote. And the people were opposite each other, and each group thought he was on their side. You can't do that in the long haul. You can't have the abortion vote and the anti-abortion vote and the busing vote and the anti-busing vote. You simply can't do it. I took a beating on the street out here from a citizen who doesn't like my stand on abortion, but at least they know where I stand. And it seemed to me that he was trying to have it both ways on this issue.
Mm-hmm. What you're saying is that a candidate has to take a stand on all issues, win or lose.
I think particularly in the presidency, you might run for the city council or some local office and have the conservatives think you're conservative and the liberals think you're liberal. You can't get elected president. There are just too many people with too many interests, and sooner or later they're going to smoke you out. And that's what's happened. I never tried to do it, but it's happening to Jimmy Carter now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll continue our program with Congressman Morris Udall in just a few moments. Resuming our program with Congressman Morris Udall, who seeks the Democratic presidential nomination. Let's take a phone call. Hello?
Yes, Congressman Udall, do you feel we should have a higher defense budget?
A what defense budget?
A higher defense budget.
A higher defense budget.
No, I don't really. We've got to be strong, we've got to be secure, we've got to have an adequate national security. But after the Korean War, defense spending went down 45% in 2 years. We cut it almost in half in 2 years. We ended the Vietnam War. We opened the door to China and detente with the Soviets. And now we're told this year that defense doesn't go down at all. It goes up by $14 billion. And the president's now asking for some more missiles today. I think we'd be safer and better off if we'd make something along the 10, 12% in that order, cuts in the defense. And I know where I would make them. And we'd be tougher and leaner and better and more secure if we take that money and do some things for our old people, and people need education, our cities and our railroads and a lot of other things.
You said you know where you'd cut. Where?
Well, we got too many bases overseas, cut some of those back. We've got atomic nuclear weapons in Korea. We've got too many generals and admirals. The force structure is overweighted. The B-1 bomber is a turkey, and we don't need it, and we won't be any safer. I would slow down on Trident, the Trident submarine program. It's immensely expensive, going to cost billions. This main battle tank, we ought to have a simpler, more usable, easily replaceable tank. These are some of the areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for your call. Let's take another call. Hello? Hi, this is Marie Torre.
Hello. I'd like to make a comment first about the ecology of our country. I think that one of the most important things in our society today is to recycle all of our waste. And I don't see any candidates pressing this point. I think this is something that they should be doing. And I was just wondering what Udall has to say about this.
Well, I couldn't agree more. In fact, if there's any candidate in the race who's been out in front on this whole business of recycling and environmental legislation, it has been I. What I'm advocating, I was out in Iowa, little town Ames, Iowa, where the university is, and they take their garbage, instead of dumping it in a landfill, which has all kind of costs and problems, they chew it up, the steel and scrap iron is taken out, the aluminum is taken out, they sell it and make money, and the rest of it's burned and produces about 1/4 of the electric power in that little town. We're going to have to learn to recycle everything, copper and steel and paper and everything. We're running out of oil, we're running out of raw materials, and this is a central part of my program, is to be thrifty, to learn how to recycle and use the resources we have wisely.
Okay, thanks. Let's hear from another viewer. Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is Marie Torre.
Hi, Marie. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And welcome, Morris Udall, to Pittsburgh.
Thank you very much. I like that.
I'm quite a supporter of yours and have been for quite a while. I've been following you up and studying you and listening to really what you're talking about. Now, I feel that the labels that we seem to tend to give parties and candidates seems to be one that I guess in the era that we've just passed with liberalism, most people here, and there's a station that sort of in town gives the idea that liberalism is really those who profess to say that we're going to give away everything to everybody. We're going to really promote those who do not want to work and let them really get that unemployment or welfare, etc., and that we're for free love and that type of thing. You all know what we've gotten with that liberalism of ours, okay? Now, I feel that the definition of these labels seems to be hurting you in Pittsburgh a little bit, because there is quite a few people, I listen to a lot of talk programs, and they kind of got that a little bit mixed up with what we really are saying. So if we could only clear that word liberalism. I think you're using progressive now.
Yeah, well, I've been saying that liberal is a worry word. You stop a guy in the street and say, I'm a great liberal, let me tell you about my liberal programs, he'll tune you out before you get to start the conversation. I find that if I talk about the progressive tradition of Roosevelt and Kennedy and Stevenson and Lyndon Johnson and so on, and Hubert Humphrey, that I get attention. You stop the same fellow and say, we got to make progress in this country. I got some progressive programs, and their health insurance, and break up oil companies, and bring back competition, and get jobs for people. They listen to you. They all agree. But the liberal's what I call a worry word. It turns people off. And so I don't run away from it. I'm proud of the liberal tradition, but I use progressive to try to promote understanding.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I may use liberal, of course, I'm reminded of some of the legions that are with you, and they were previously with Eugene McCarthy, with George McGovern. If they didn't win, why should you be optimistic about your chances?
Because there's a progressive trend out there in America. People know that our country's in trouble, that we're running out of oil and gas, that the economy isn't working, that we're going to have to do the kind of things I've been talking about on this program. This isn't 72, and I'm not George McGovern. I like McGovern. We're old friends. But I'm talking issues that I think a majority of the American people want. And, you know, I'm in the mainstream tradition of this party. You take Muskie, Humphrey, Phil Hart, Walter Mondale, Ted Kennedy, the leaders, Mike Mansfield, the Democratic Party. I'm right in the middle of that mainstream, and I'm a little bit to the right of Hubert Humphrey on most of these rating sheets. So I'm proud of the kind of support I've had, and I've also had labor and farmers and a pretty broad-based support, and I think I can win. I think I'm the one person in the race that has the best chance of beating Gerald Ford. I fought him for 13 years in the House. I know his weaknesses, and I can take him on.
Mm-hmm. Though he's not a declared candidate, we still keep hearing about Hubert Humphrey and that prospect. How do you feel about that?
Well, old Triple H is a great guy, and he's widely beloved by me and others. He's a fine person and a friend of mine. He's got every right to run. He's been honest. He's a straight shooter. He told us he wasn't going to run the primaries. He isn't. He told us if no one had put it together by convention time, he would like to look around, see if he could be nominated. He ought to, and he's going to give it a try. But I don't think that the nomination is going to go to somebody who stood by and let the rest of us beat our brains out in all of these primaries. I think one of us in the primary is going to get the nomination, and I intend to be that person. Mm.
You mentioned before your controversial view on the abortion issue. Would you spell it out for...
Sure, and you lose some and you win some. You can't please everybody. I believe that the Supreme Court was right. At least they said the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, it's a matter of choice. And I recognize the strong feelings about when life begins in this debate, but the plain fact is that abortion laws don't stop abortions. We had them for 200 years and they didn't. They simply drove them into back alleys, and women of wealth went to Mexico or Sweden or someplace. Someone told me, Marie, that an estimate that there are 20 million American women alive today who ought to be in jail or ought to have criminal records if we're going to enforce abortion laws. Now, just as a practical matter, a society shouldn't put laws on the books if you're not ready to enforce them, and judges and prosecutors are not going to put that many women in jail. So we ought to face up to the reality and try to discourage abortion and try to make options available and these kinds of things, but I think the Supreme Court was right. It has to be a matter of choice in the final analysis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take another phone call. Hello? Hi, this is Marie Torre.
Yes.
Do you have a question for Congressman Udall?
Yes, I do. The question I was going to ask is, we buy a home in the suburbs, and then the federal government taxes us for taxes, then turns around and shoves worse busings down there. So I was just curious as to what his comment on that ties in with the ethnic purity question that was brought up.
Well, okay, you're saying you're complaining about the taxes?
Well, no, we pay taxes to support everything, and then they turn around and use the taxes to shove it down our throat, which, if the majority opinion is taken, we don't want forced busing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we all believe in an integrated society. I think we all believe that court orders ought to be obeyed. I think there's a general consensus in the country, not only among whites, but increasingly in the black community, that busing is often counterproductive, that it doesn't really give anybody much of a better education. But the bottom line, if these federal judges don't go to court in the morning and say, gee, I'm feeling bad today, I think I'll order some buses for somebody. You don't have a busing order unless somebody's gone to court and says my constitutional rights have been violated. The judge has held a trial, you've had an appeal, he's found that that is true, and then some buses have to be ordered to redress the constitutional rights. I saw this coming, and I tried to put together a black-white Republican-Democrat coalition 4 years ago to get the Congress and the President into the act. We have stood back and dumped this tough social problem on schools and on courts, and they're not equipped to handle it. I think if you follow the bill that I've drafted, which is constitutional, says to communities, sit down, the way Racine, Wisconsin did, and St. Louis and other places, and you work out a program that may or may not involve busing and probably won't, then you could minimize it. You could have all kinds of alternatives to busing. But as long as the Congress and the President won't lead out on this, and as long as we're saying to the black community, well, your constitutional rights are not going to be enforced, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think I have the standing. I've been the friend of the blacks and the minorities. I've stood up for them on this. I think I can work with them to minimize the disruptive effects of unnecessary busing, and some of it is unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I can't thank you enough, Congressman, for taking the time to squeeze in this appearance today.
Marie, glad to be with you. Great program you have. Invite me back sometime.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Thanks again. I'll return in just a few moments with a new subject. It has to do with English words.